All right, we are back. Me and Cop back together again for another new player Mythic Plus guide that we've been working on here, trying to help him go from noob to pro, as he's calling it. And this time we're in Waycrest Manor. Now, we're in this dungeon for a very specific reason. Cop, why don't you tell him why?
I hate this place, Metro. It scares me. I get lost.
Would I be right in saying that this is your least confident dungeon?
Probably, yeah, absolutely. This and Shrine of the Storm, just because I think I've done Shrine of the Storm once.
Okay.
So,
and a big part of why is because there's multiple different pathways, and Cop's not, he's not famous for his navigation skills, let's put it that way. So I think the focus of what we're going to do here today is I'm going to teach him everything that he needs to know about the ups and downs of this dungeon. We're going to go through 100% of the dungeon's actual surface area, and we'll talk about the different routes, because this is actually something that everybody should be aware of. If you're doing this for the first time, or, you know, even if you've done it a few times, you still might discover surprises in this dungeon. So hopefully we'll learn everything we need to learn today. And yeah, hopefully Cop will get what he needs to learn about the paths. But typically you walk up here and you actually see the first boss. Well, depending on the route, you see the bosses are standing there kind of guarding the stairs. A lot of times there's an emissary here. It does look like with the new season that there'll be one of the portals there as well, depending. I don't know if they're going to vary it or not, but there was when we tested it. So out of the gate, you're going to have some stuff going on. These mobs that we're fighting right now are very easy to kill. They're pretty much free count. They have very little health, and they're just perfect. Like any dungeon you do in Mythic Plus, you really want to walk out of the gate with all your CDs up. A lot of classes even, you know, use their CDs before the dungeon starts. So this is an ideal pull to pull both sides here. But if you do not need the count, you really don't want to pull both sides. A lot of the times I'll just get the right side or the left side depending on what's going on, and then we'll just run up the stairs and the other side just kind of sits there. So that's something to consider. But I don't know if you're actually aware of this, Cop, but did you know that there's basically 4 different routes that you can take in this dungeon?
wow. I always understood that there was a right or left at the start, and after that I just get lost and try to follow the tank.
Yeah. So all 4 of these doors in the main area here can be opened. All right. So unfortunately, you know, we're doing this on normal, whatever. You know, we don't have the ability to open the door, but we are going to go through 100% of the surface area of this dungeon, talk about every possible route, and actually perfectly, we get what I believe to be mathematically the most difficult route in this dungeon possibility, because the mobs, first of all, the few mobs that you'll fight up here are a pain compared to the stuff that you might fight on the other side of the dungeon. But more so is going right in general almost always leads you to a factor of extreme count. You pretty much have no opportunity to go under count when you go right. Whereas if you go left, you skip a lot of stuff that you don't need, especially on the way to Raal the Gluttonous, and it just helps you with count a lot. It makes the dungeon go a lot faster, and early on in the expansion, a lot of people were straight up calling it, if you went right, you just were not going to upgrade the key. But, you know, that depends on the level, of course. So the main thing here that you want to work on with these 2 mobs is this mob type. These dogs aren't really that dangerous. There's not much to talk about. They do a fair amount of magic damage and stuff, but the marksman is the real problem. She's going to do a lot of different things that are going to be really painful if you're not... basically a lot of different traps and a lot of different ranged type abilities. So for me as a Blood DK, I like to kind of pull this back, but either way, you're going to want to grab it and take it out here, because you really don't want to fight it in that corridor. It can oftentimes cause a lot of problems just because of the small AoEs that are going to go on the ground, but it could also even pull other trash, which we'll take a look at when we get in there. But yeah, typically this is how I would start this dungeon. As you see, those explosives, a lot of AoE damage that can happen in this dungeon. So you just got to be cognizant if you're going top right. It's the same, pretty much same bottom right. We'll take a look at the downstairs real quick. In fact, Cop, we could actually just jump down here and we'll show what's down here. But yeah, this pack here that we've just engaged is actually the same deal. You got a marksman and a survivalist, which is technically a melee mob. But we did aggro a rune weaver. So let's kill all this trash, and then we'll talk about what these mobs specifically are. In fact, while we do, you see those red circles there. That's from the marksman, as we were describing. But as we're killing this mob, you'll see there this kind of like organ looking thing. Now the whole dungeon is actually a giant organ. If you've ever looked at the outside of it, have you ever flown above this dungeon, Cop?
I've flown above it, but I've never paid much attention.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. You should check it out. Check a look at it whenever you get a chance. It's like this giant organ right out of like maybe like Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, sticking out of the roof. And it's actually a key mechanic in this dungeon, which I think a lot of people don't know about. This organ, if it had that black glow to it that it had when we jumped down here, that means it's going to summon one of these witches. And these witches are particularly dangerous. They're basically a heavy caster. Typically, if you're fighting them, you probably don't want to interrupt too many of their abilities, but you want to interrupt the volley ability that they have because it's going to hit everybody. But they do this etch ability, and it's kind of just like a single target channel. So a lot of people believe that it's best to not interrupt that because it makes them not able to cast their other ability that is way more dangerous. But the main thing to notice here is that you probably would not have any idea about that. That organ there is going to be the precursor to summoning them. So whenever you run by an organ with some black stuff next to it, be aware that you might summon an ad. And look at this weird mirror here too. You ever see this? It's kind of weird. But anyway, so let's go back upstairs real quick then just to talk about something that we missed. So again, that's basically both right pathways. The downstairs one is definitely better than the upstairs one just because this hallway is particularly painful to fight mobs in. And downstairs it's a lot easier to get out, but you'd be even in worse count. Now these mobs in here are mobs that you don't like. You literally don't fight them anywhere. In fact, you see they have these weird masks on. You see that?
Let's have a look. Oh yeah.
It's a bit creepy almost, right? But so as you see, another organ with the black glow on it. So more mobs. Another Heartsbane Vine Twister this time. So. But anyway, we're showing you these mobs not because they're particularly interesting for Mythic Plus, but because of the opposite. You really do not want to aggro these mobs, and I have seen it quite a lot where people come top right and they get a little bit confused by this mob pack here. Like, we'd be fighting the mobs that were here. They'd be dropping AoE stuff. We'd try to run out of it, and some fool runs this way, and that is that. You've now aggroed another pack, so... this dungeon is pretty much known for stuff like that. The mob density is very high at times, and you really got to be careful. So, all right. So anyway, we've we've gone upper right. We're coming this way now, and this is where the count gets kind of complicated because you can't really avoid this. There's no way you could avoid this hallway, and all you can do is hope because there's more randomness to it. So that maggot ability is actually interruptible. If you ever see an ability called Infest from one of the maggots themselves, you want to try to kick that, especially as a melee. You could stun it, ring, etc. So actually, here we got the perfect RNG for this then. So another element of randomness in this dungeon is whether or not this door is open as well. And I think people suggest that it's predictable once you get the first path that everything else cascades off it. But one way or the other, I don't know that too much about that. But all I know is that this door is not open. So that means we now have to go all the way around to the other side to even enter this room, where sometimes you might get to this side and you'd be able to just walk right in here, and that would save some of the count that we're going to have to pull on this kind of left side of the second hallway here, including that patrol. That mob that we just fought there while we were talking about the door, that's actually a patrol, and you can avoid that if you get lucky, effectively. If not, you're going to fight it, but if it pats at the right time when you're on one side or the other, it will effectively be skipped. And then that's another good way to skip count in here. But yeah, as you see, we're effectively going to have to pull 100% of this hallway. There's no way we'll avoid this stuff. And to get out of this into the main foyer, we are going to have to pull that pack across from us as well. So yeah, pretty complicated stuff. Now, this room is another one that's really complicated, and the trash in here isn't particularly dangerous. It's mostly the same stuff we've been fighting, but these steward mob types here, I mark the one with skull, and the other one's a pat over there, okay? That blue, the blue marker, it patrols, and it can cause a lot of problems on, say, a bolstering week. You might try to pull one pack, and he will pat into you while you're doing it. Or as you see there, I tried to pull them separate, and it got another mob, so... just be aware that there's a patrol in this room. It's not the most dangerous thing, obviously, especially on a normal week, but any week where you're worried about trash, it can really complicate things. So typically one way or the other, no matter which direction we come, there's only this one pig, and then there's these mobs here. So I like to get both of these packs together. But the main thing you really got to be aware of in this dungeon is not pulling the boss in this room, okay? Also, the stewards are notable for that AoE silence ability. You really want to target them and interrupt them. But let's talk now about the boss, because this is a very unique room. It's very small. It's quite wide, but it's not very deep. And it's extremely easy to pull this boss very, very often. I've seen it happen a lot with warlocks because their pets kind of go running all around and do all kinds of AoE. And I've had it happen myself a lot with Dancing Rune Weapon. This pack that we just killed here, the ones that would have been right in front of us in front of these tables here, that is a prime target to use Dancing Rune Weapon on. There's a lot of mobs, high volume, couple dangerous mobs. So for me, I'd run in here with Dancing Rune Weapon up, pop 2 blood boils, and the Dancing Rune Weapon would hit the boss. And I'd imagine a lot of abilities might do that. So maybe your clones might do the same.
Yeah, Storm, Earth, and Fire. If I'm not careful and hit it again to make sure it's single target.
Yeah.
Like they're concentrating in that.
Yeah.
Even the one essence would probably go up and hit it.
There's a couple options, I'm sure. It's basically on the tank to stop it. If you just grab them and pull them back. So a lot of times I would have kind of aggroed them from right here, this doorway. I would D&D, or maybe I would usually actually grip them out and then kind of run around the corner with them, so there's no way anybody can actually hit them. But just be aware that if you fight that pack, especially in this room, you got to be very careful as the tank, and you got to be aware that the DPS might make a mistake. And if you make that mistake, it's probably going to be a wipe. This boss is stationary, so he cannot run out of a room. Typically, if you pull a boss in a Mythic Plus, it's not the end of the world. You just run them out of their playable area, and they usually reset. This boss cannot reset. It is stationary. And the big problem here is that in order to reset him, you have to run out of the entire area. So basically, this banquet hall you see on the map, it says we're in the banquet hall. We would have to leave the banquet hall. So now let's recap the problems here. We have pulled Raal the Gluttonous, and in order to leave the banquet hall, we either have to go out that way and pull trash, or we have to run all the way back around here. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just impossible. So all the time that we do aggro him, he is doing this AoE ability to it. Maybe we could actually pull it and show. He's going to do like this massive AoE. So let's see what happens. Yeah, consume all. There we go. So he's going to be hitting us for, obviously on normal, it's not doing anything, but he's going to be hitting us constantly. And let's let's run and see how far it takes to actually reset it. But as you see, we are 70, 80 yards away from him. And it actually works a little bit easier than I thought. But let's be clear. That ability that he casts will hit you for about 40% of your health on a real key. So he's not going to get 4 of those off. You know what I mean? If he does, you're dead. So you're never going to get out one way or the other. It's pretty rare to get out. But other than that, just again, the stewards. And even when you're on this side of the room, you really got to be careful. You don't want to tank him too close to Raal because of pets and random AoE. So the boss itself is pretty easy, not much to it. There's going to be, I'll put some markers, there's going to be 4 ads that come in. They come in kind of from the doorways, effectively. All right, so basically 1 at each door. If they get to him and he eats them, they buff him, effectively. They can get to him, and then he has to cast an eating ability on them. It takes a little bit. It's not immediate. But yeah, if he's not doing another ability, he'll pretty much get them immediately. But if he is doing another ability, you usually have a couple seconds there. So great option as a monk. You ring a piece. You can literally just wait until they're kind of right next to him and then ring all 4 of them out. Do you know what I mean there?
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then as a DK and, like a death grip. And a great option is to kind of wait until they're about halfway through their run. And then I will Gore Fiends all 4 of them together. I have to do that because otherwise they wouldn't be close enough. But I'll Gore Fiends all 4 of them together and then slow them with D&D. And they get killed pretty quick that way, but of course you can only do that the one time. So on really hard tyrannical keys, this fight is actually pretty difficult because those ads really they come quick and they stack up. Let's put it that way. You're going to be attacking the ads for a long time, so it's in your best interest to stun them or root them or even hard CC them. Again, as a monk, you'd have the option to paralyze one, but a lot of people just ignore them on lower keys or keys that aren't particularly dangerous. People just ignore them, let them get close, and then kind of AoE them down.
Gotcha.
The other big mechanic here, obviously, is the puddles on the ground. Yeah, that's a great place to put ring, basically. So no matter what, whichever direction they're coming from, they couldn't possibly get to them. But yeah, this mechanic there is actually somewhat difficult too on higher keys. It's a serious slow, and when there's a lot out, it's gonna really be a problem. Obviously on normal, it doesn't summon the ads, looks like, but on Mythic and higher, it's gonna summon ads every time he does that as well. So this tenderize mechanic is what makes it complicated. Like, you have to run through it, and if you're not a DK, you're gonna be slowed by a dramatic amount. So there's the call servant, and you see he's doing other mechanics as well. If the call servant got to him while he was doing, say, the pulverize mechanic, he wouldn't eat them immediately. It would take a little bit of time, so you have a little bit of extra time. That's what we were describing. But
Gotcha.
okay, so now we are ready to move on to the second half of the dungeon, effectively. Whatever the first boss is the boss you want to lust on, but another problem with coming left is that a lot of people believe lust is wasted because left takes so much longer to get to a boss, whereas right takes almost, well, this direction, I mean to say right when you enter the dungeon, sorry. When you come to the banquet hall first is what I mean. It takes a lot longer to get through the trash. So you might even see people who actually recommend lusting before the boss and then pulling all the trash to the second boss and then coming and doing a boss with lust instead. This is something that I ran into randomly while I was pugging, and it really kind of stunned me. I didn't expect it at all, and it kind of ruined the run because I wasn't expecting it. But you should be aware that if anybody tries, I mean, as a DPS it doesn't really matter, but if anybody tries to lust on trash in the side of the dungeon, you're going to end up not fighting the boss pretty quickly. So
You're not going to have lust for the boss, yeah.
yeah, you'd have to then pull the rest of the trash and wait for lust, basically. And then at that point, a lot of people would just use lust on the second boss, because the first boss really, the pig is the easiest boss in here for sure. So just something to keep in mind. Now this little courtyard here is a pain. Again, we got maggots. This courtyard here is a pain. There's 2 packs of the dogs, and this like quadrant of the dungeon is where bolstering really gets messy here, because these mobs are basically free mobs. They have almost no health compared to the rest of the pack, and if you fight them on a normal week, they don't do anything. But if you're fighting them on something like sanguine, bolstering, etc., you really got to be careful here. I like to pull both packs at once, no matter what, and this is actually lined up perfectly. I can get both packs very easily, so that's our goal. But a lot of the times, if you do pull aggressively here, you're going to end up with extra stuff. And you really got to make sure you don't pull that left pack. As you see, that pack right now at least often has an emissary in it. In the future, I don't know what's going to happen, but typically I would just grab this mob as well. Now this Thorn Shaper, something to keep in mind here, it's going to cast an ability called something like an effigy, reconstruct effigy or something like that. He's going to try to heal any basically aberrations, I believe. Like, so the dogs, basically mobs that look like this are going to get healed, okay? The kind of like the wicker looking mobs, the dogs will get healed, and that dude that we just fought there will get healed. So again, if you're doing this on bolstering and you pull the dogs with those packs, you better make sure you interrupt that, because if they get bolstered and she heals that dude to full, that's that. You might as well just wipe. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be like a 5 million health mob that you're going to have to kill from full then. So either way, you want to pull this next pack as well. Like I said, usually some extra stuff going on here. But something that a lot of people probably don't know is that this fire actually does damage the mob. So watch, oh, it's gone. But we actually saw it, like, coincidentally in the video before without even trying. But if you take notice, if the fire was actually there, if you take notice, the fire does actually damage the mobs as long as they're stood in it. I believe they'll have a debuff as well. So you could see, yeah, as you see, taking damage from the fire there. So it's not a bad idea. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's probably worth it.
Every little bit helps.
Yeah. See if we can get it to really shine on this pack here. Yep, there you go. As you see, taking about 2% of its health every tick. So not the hugest thing in the game, but it can actually help a lot on this matron. So this is another one that, I mean, this dungeon, this part of the dungeon really is just, it's easy most weeks, but when it's bolstering, it's extremely difficult. So again, you got 3 very low health mobs next to 1 extremely dangerous mob. So there's a couple ways to handle this. Apparently, as a monk, you can do a very interesting thing here. Whereas if you put ring at the right spot, I'm not exactly sure where, but if you put ring at the right spot, it's going to knock the dogs away from the mob. I think it's like right there. I've seen people do it, but I'm not exactly sure. So you have ring?
I have ring.
Try to put it right on the moon. There you go. Oh wait, of course I did it like an idiot, but what we were supposed to do was knock the dogs away from the mob and not pull the mob. but I did the opposite, so it doesn't matter, obviously, but that's what you want to do on a bolstering week in here. If you have a monk, you want to knock the mobs away. If you don't have a monk, which obviously is very likely, you can just have basically any melee tank those 3 mobs away. So a lot of the times we might have, you know, especially I've seen it a lot with demon hunters. Demon hunters might run over to the side there with the skull, tank that mob there, and then I'll take the boss, like the mini boss mob, the matron mob, and take it over kind of here, just so no matter what, there's this line of sight kind of in between, and it's far enough away regardless. So that will prevent the bolster, and those mobs are light enough that a single damage dealer can kill them easily, but just something to keep in mind. You really don't want to be messing around with that bolster on that mob because it's very dangerous, very high health pool. So,
gotcha.
Okay, so Soulbound Goliath, probably one of the easier fights depending on your tank. There's going to be really only one mechanic that any damage dealer is ever going to have to worry about, and that is the stun. As a monk, I don't think there's any way you could deal with it, but if you're playing a different class, you can get out of it very easily. I've been told there's ways that druids, and I think even shaman could do it too. I think if you're in Ghost Wolf, when it picks you, it will not stun you, and I think maybe even the same thing with cat form and stuff like that. If you shift forms or something, it will prevent the stun. Obviously, Icebound would probably work too. Bop will work as well. An immunity like that, it's going to prevent. So if you're a mage, ice block, etc. Basically, any stun prevention you have to use it preemptively though, because obviously once you're in that, you're not able to get out of it. So, but I don't believe as a monk there's anything you could do particularly. But the main part of this fight that a lot of people probably don't know about is that when you burn the boss, so basically the boss's stacks here. Let's show that off right now since we got some fire. The bosses, every melee, you know, every second basically you fight the boss. That might not actually happen on normal, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, you're in Soul Thorns, so you want to kill that quick. But anyway, maybe it's just not burning. I don't know. This fight is actually really a big pain as a tank because a lot of the times it's actually difficult to get him in the fire. Yeah, there you go. So on normal it doesn't happen, but typically it's going to summon a bunch of little pink ghosts that come running around. And they do a lot of damage. Basically, they melee you. So if, you know, what you want to do here is, if we're going to fight him here, you know, he's going to burn. The ghosts are going to come out and run towards him. So then you just want to kind of move to the opposite side. So if we fought him there, just move to one of the other 3 areas, basically. And, you know, you'll avoid getting hit by those ghosts as much as possible. But typically, you know, if you're tanking, especially with a Brewmaster, or even like a bear or a warrior, somebody who's got extremely good physical mitigation, a lot of people won't even reset that, especially if it's a fortified week. Pretty likely that you won't even see that mechanic happen. The boss will just stand still and the tank will just deal with it.
Gotcha.
But I do believe that the boss's root mechanic will also do more damage, so if that does happen, just be aware you might actually die in that root. Now again, another point of randomness is which of these 2 doors you're going to go. There's not really a lot of impact here, but it does mean that that, you know, you're going to pull 1 extra pack, right? Typically, you would, there's a lot of likelihood that you're going to fight this pack itself anyway, but yeah, just one way or the other, you're going to have to pull this now. And this is where we get a really new, a dangerous new mob type here. It's called the Enthralled Guard. Also, we got another one of these. As you see, because of the black right across from us, there's the...
Oh, okay, the organ.
Yeah, the organ. That's it. Drawing a blank there. But anyway, another problem you see is this patrol. This patrol that just aggroed on us, it came from upstairs. It patrols down to this part of the hallway and then back upstairs. So another one that you could skip. It's a lot easier to skip if you go in that far door, not the one we went in, but the opposite one. But this path, you're pretty much always going to aggro unless you get really lucky. It can cause a lot of problems with bolstering again. But anyway, the guard itself is very, very dangerous. He's going to basically do... Let's keep these in combat for a bit and let's see some of the abilities they do. They're basically going to do 2 different abilities that you really need to try to prevent. Shadow Cleave right there. It's going to do a frontal cone. And of course, you know, if you're a melee and you're not behind the mob, you're probably going to take a serious amount of damage. I've seen people get almost 1 shot by it. Now they should do another mechanic. Maybe they're not going to do it. But either way, a lot of interruptible mechanics. Typically when you fight this pack, I guess maybe because it's normal or something, they're not doing it. Oh, there it is, Spirited Defense. So that's the mechanic there. Damage taken reduced by 35%, okay? So this is high priority interrupts. You really need to interrupt this, especially if you're combining the packs. That's the captain mob, and then the guard mob is going to do the cleave. So together, this pack is going to be up for a long period of time if you're not interrupting this. It can be purged, though. So if you're a Blood Elf, of course, you can purge it. Otherwise, you got to be a Demon Hunter, Shaman, or Priest to do it as well. I think that's probably the only options. I don't think it can be removed any other way. So we're about to make a big mistake here, and I'm going to show you this mistake firsthand. As you see, another one of these organ, the black stuff is coming out of the organ. That means when we run down there, we're going to aggro a mob. Okay, so let's do that. All right, so we're going to the boss. Oh, the door's closed. Oh, wow. So not only did we go the wrong direction, but we aggroed a mob that we did not need to aggro. And the reason the door is closed is because the path is determinate on which doors are open on this side as well. So, like I said, it's probably determinate on the whole dungeon. But basically, long story short, if you go up right, you have to go up left as well, okay? So if your first path is up right, you then have to go up these stairs and down to get to the Heartsbane Triad, okay? And these mobs in here aren't too dangerous. I mean, this is kind of like a troll here. But again, another another organ with spawning a mob. I feel like this happened, maybe on Mythic Plus, there's a limited number of it. Basically, there's like 6 or so spawns, maybe more. And typically, you're going to get maybe 3 of them. I don't think, we've had literally every single one, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, I don't think that's meant to happen there. I think that's maybe just because we're doing it on not Mythic Plus. But either way, just be aware, those are where all these mobs spawn. I'm pretty sure we've now seen every location. Maybe there's one that we haven't seen yet, but either way. Alright, so you typically just kill the birds. Nothing special. It's the same mob types that you would have seen. Long story short, just interrupt as much as you can. Now, there's that patrol there. If you came top left, which we'll talk about in a second, you want to go just jump down here, okay? And a lot of times, again, if you went right at all, you're going to be way over count. So the way I like to deal with that is just pull this side here. Kill this, pretty much all this trash is going to do that green circle there. It's going to confuse you or whatever. It's going to disorient you when it explodes. And then the main mob is just going to do a channel. So it's kind of a pain because the green is going to surround the mob. And if you get too close, you're going to get disoriented. And the main mob is going to be channeling. So you have to make sure you interrupt it. Otherwise, you're going to run into it and get disoriented. Okay, so the bosses typically is fought. A lot of people fight in the middle of the room. But when you're tight on count, you really want to skip that left pack. Especially because in Season 3, almost always one of these packs has an emissary in it. So pulling extra, even more extra, is not ideal. Now, the best way that I handle this, at least, is to taunt and then interrupt. But it doesn't really matter as a damage dealer. You can go over there and start fighting while the boss runs over here. But the goal is basically get them on this side of the room. And the main reason we want to do that is because a lot of, if you get a mage or a hunter or a demon hunter, they'll use their movement abilities and they'll blink or disengage or whatever onto the other side of the room. They'll do that ability and go 20 yards away from where they start. So if you fought them in the dead center of the room and you had, say, a demon hunter get mind controlled by the first mob, it's going to backflip into that pack over there. It's obviously not ideal, right? And I don't know, maybe Monk would do the same. I've never really paid attention to who does it, but I have seen us wipe here a lot. And it even causes arguments because then people complain about having too little space to fight. But you don't really have that problem. You can fight in the middle of the room as long as the melee are on the boss and the boss is over here. But let's talk a little bit about this boss because this is definitely the hardest boss in here. This boss is known as the key killer for really any tyrannical week or any week where the healer might have to work a little bit harder, like Grievous. This fight is very, very, very bad because it's effectively 3 different encounters in one, and all 3 of them are particularly dangerous. So the first one is Sister Selena. By the way, you can only attack one at a time. One is going to hold an orb, it's going to be attackable because of that. So you only attack the one. DBM will automatically mark that one with the skull. If you have that add-on, somebody likely in your group will have it. But either way, just realize it's always Selena first. And then it goes to the right one, Malady, and then it goes to Briar next. That's the combo. But anyway, Selena is going to start, and her main mechanic is that she's going to mind control somebody, okay? So the big tip here is that if you're a class that if they got mind controlled, something bad would happen, you want to use that something bad before it happens. So what I mean by that is if you're a mage, a paladin, you have an immunity, right? Well, you get mind controlled and you are now using that immunity as the mind control target. And you have to be killed. You have to be broken to 50% for the phase to continue. While she is mind controlling you, she is immune. And this is basically a DPS race encounter because after a long period of time, if you do not kill her, she is going to cast an ability that will pretty much one-shot everybody. So I might actually have to deal with her energy bar. I'm not exactly sure when, but all I know is you have a long time, and then when she casts it, you're pretty much done. It can be dealt with. I've even seen people try to line of sight it. I don't know exactly if it works, but all I know is that if she gets that cast off, you should recognize that that means your damage is too low. So realistically, if you're in here doing a key, you might notice that in a pug, bad group, somebody dies, you're going to hit that and rage. But it is 100% magic damage, so as a monk, you're pretty well equipped to deal with that. But realistically, if it gets off, something's gone wrong, and you're probably going to wipe. Okay, so that's Sister Selena. She's going to mind control. So again, you got to get that person killed mad quick, and then quickly switch back to Selena to kill her, to push her to 50. Then at 50, she switches the orb to Malady. Okay, Malady is the second one, and it's going to do it's going to cast like a ring around people, all 5 targets. I like to AMS this. It's like a cast, and then it happens to everybody. So as she's casting it, you could AMS it, and it'll not go on you. All right, you could do the same as Paladin. You could bubble and not go on you, etc. Good idea to bubble there. If you didn't get mind controlled, you might want to bubble and get that off. And the other main mechanic on that part of the fight is that every time you're stationary, you gain a stack. It's a pretty common mechanic in WoW's history, but it's particularly dangerous on this one because of course, the room we're fighting in, but also some of the other mechanics that are happening. If you're stationary, though, you're going to take a stack of ticking damage. It's going to keep going up and up and up. So you got to move to drop that. Easiest way is to jump. Of course, if you're a caster, you got a lot of work ahead of you. So, and then gotcha. Sister Briar is the final one, the final one of the 3 that you're going to fight. And she's very complicated for the healer. She's going to put out basically a grievous wound, like the actual fix, but it's only going to go on 1 target. And you have to get them topped off. You have to get them above 90%. Otherwise, it keeps getting harder and harder, I believe. I don't know if it actually gets harder and harder, but basically, if the healer isn't 100% ready for it, I've seen a lot of deaths here, even on relatively low keys. So if you're healing this for the first time, just be aware that when Sister Briar is active, when she's not active, they don't do anything. They just cast a weakened version of their main ability, like their main casted ability, which can be interrupted. You want to try to interrupt all 3 of these guys, but definitely the one that's active because it does more damage. But ideally, you'd have interrupts on all 3. But either way, when they're not active, when they're not attackable, when they're not holding the orb, they're not going to do their other mechanics. It's only when you're actually fighting them. So this is why it's such a DPS race, because if basically you have 2 waves of mechanics, like for example, Sister Selena gets 2 mind controls off, you're going to wipe. Like that means you don't have enough damage to kill her before the AoE thing happens. So you're going to have either a massive strategy in place for that or expect to die. And then again, so yeah, Briar's just going to do this kind of like, it's basically a bunch of thorns damage. And then she's also going to do that jagged nettle, I believe it's called, where it needs to be healed off immediately. So if you're a healer, you got to monitor that debuff. As soon as it's on somebody, pop, whatever you have to, your best single target heals, get that off people immediately, and then get back to work. So that's going to repeat twice. Every time one gets to 50, the orb swaps to the other one. Now, on a lower key and with really good damage, I've actually seen them one-phase it. Do it before it splits. Basically burn Selena from 100 to 0 in a quick enough time that, she couldn't actually change the orb. Like in the middle of her mechanic, she can't swap. The orb can't swap. So if you do it at the right time, you might actually be able to skip that. So if you're on a lower fortified key, like a 10 fortified, that's pretty likely that can happen. But on a serious key, the big question to ask here is, when do you want to bloodlust? A lot of people, they waffle a bit on the topic here. For me, I always like bloodlusting on the pole. Pre-pot, all CDs up, bloodlust on the pole. That's my go-to, right? You're going to maximize your DPS that way.
Yeah.
But it's not always pertinent to do that because you might actually overkill it. Like, unless you're going to actually burn Selena from 1 to 0 with that bloodlust, you might not want to do that. Instead, you might want to save it for either another of these 3 mobs or the second time you fight Selena. One way or the other, you got to make sure that you kill them all before the AoE goes off. All 3 of them can do it. So if you for some reason killed 2 mad quick and the third one's somehow full health or something like that, I don't think that's possible, but you know, if one's taking much longer than the other 2 because of the way you use cooldowns, you can still wipe at the very end. If it's literally just Briar up and she gets that ability off, you might still have deaths. And obviously if the tank and the healer die, then that's that, right? So I don't really know what I would recommend lusting. You know, maybe people will have their thoughts in the comments, but I've seen all different types of things work. I've seen lust on the pole on Selena, lust on the second one, Malady, because you, like I said, that's pretty much, you don't want to overkill Selena. You don't want to. There's no reason to get her from 100 to 30. It's either 100 to 0 or 100 to 50. There's no real reason to get her to 130. But it's, you know, Malady, you don't want to go from 1 to 50 so slow that she gets 2 rounds of abilities off. So it might be better to lust there, something like that. That's what the thought process is there. Or it's better to just save it the second time around. Now, it's also a good idea to save it the second time around because there's a lot of possibilities for mistakes in this boss. And if you wipe here, you're pretty much screwed if you bloodlust it on the pole because you're going to come back here. That mistake is probably going to happen again because you don't have lust. And this is a key killer. This is the boss that I think it's like up there, the 3 hardest bosses in the game for sure. I would say, typically I might say this is number 1 or 2. Some might say 2 or 3, maybe even a little bit lower. But one way or the other, commonly regarded as the hardest boss in the dungeon for sure, one of the hardest in the game. And what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on this boss?
I'm a little overwhelmed. Like, that's a lot of info, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just go through. Don't do any damage. Let's just go through the fight, and we'll see how it plays out. And hopefully you'll see all the mechanics in action. But just be aware, it is a console fight. Even though there's a lot of stuff going on, it's still like, it's not going on that rapidly. You know what I mean? It's only, the main mechanics are only ever going to happen once, unless your DPS is so low that they happen twice. If your DPS is that low and you don't pick it up the second time you fight them, you're probably going to wipe. That's the TLDR version, okay? So if you ever see one of these mechanics from one of these bosses twice and you don't have CDs up the second time you fight them, that same one, expect to wipe. That's kind of the short answer. So, all right, so let's see what happens here. So again, claim the Iris. She's now active. I'm going to pull her over here. She's going to cast an ability. I'm going to interrupt her to bring her even further, okay? So let's just don't even, oh, you have attacked her already. Okay, there you go. So she's still going to mind control. You see, now you're mind controlled. You actually incapacitated me. So there's a great example of what we're talking about. Now, we actually, oh yeah, so this is really interesting. So we pushed her so fast, just because it's normal, that she did the mechanic, but then pushed after the mechanic. So we actually still had to break cop out. But anyway, as you see, this is the unstable runic mark. That's the ability I was talking about. You can AMS that. We're also taking the damage. If you see, well, maybe it's not on normal actually. But anyway, if you were standing still, you'd be taking extra damage. You want to jump to prevent that. And then now we find the final one. So as you see, the first 2 are still casting abilities. There's Jagged Nettles. It's on you. So inflicting blah 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 damage every 1 second. Removed if above 90% health. So you're actually gonna die to that. That's gonna kill you even on normal. How nuts is that? Crazy mechanic. Very dangerous. And luckily Cop was able to get it off him by healing himself. But even on normal, you can see the potential there. So now we're fighting them again. As you see, this one's already at 40 because we kind of pushed her hard on the pole. It's very likely to happen. But you know, we might see another mind control. But yeah, so I definitely think it's based on this energy. 42 looks like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's based on this energy. So I'm not gonna kill Cop. Let's let him. She's still taking damage though. So it is only a 99% damage reduction. She just died randomly. Anyway, it is only a 99% damage reduction. So it is possible that you could do a little bit of damage to them. It's still good to have them all clumped up. Because, you know, it is, even though it's like maybe like 10 damage per second on them, it's still a little bit of damage. You might get them down 1% or 2. So let's see what happens when this energy bar hits 100. I'm pretty sure that's when she casts the ability. And as you see, they have different percentages. they only gain energy when they're active, right? So that's why it's so important to kill them as quick as possible when they're active. Yeah, here you go, Dire Ritual. So as you see, it's going to do a ton of damage. And yeah, there you go. I mean, it didn't obviously do anything on normal, but that's the mechanic. So when you see the energy bar get to 100, it's because they're holding the orb, apparently, increasing the caster's energy by 2 seconds every 1 second. Didn't actually know that. But yeah, whenever they're holding the orb, i.e. they're the active boss, they're going to gain energy. And if the bar gets to 100, then you pretty much wipe. Or you could try to survive it, but realistically, you're going to wipe.
Yeah, it ate through my Touch of Karma.
Yeah.
Put up Touch of Karma, and it went instantly off.
Yeah. So this boss is definitely, like, numerically very, very dangerous. Like, just no matter how geared you are, how skilled you are, if you don't know what's going on in this dungeon, it's a bad time, this boss, especially on a fortified, especially on a weak like Quacking or a weak like Brevis, something like that, you know. So we're back here. After all that time, you might have forgotten that there is a organ right here. So you might run out here and again aggro the mob that you don't need because you're over count, right? So either way, we already did it, but just keep that in mind, okay? If you're going up right side, you want to go up left side, and as you come turn the stairs, make sure you check to see if this organ is going to spawn a mob. If it's not, then you can do it, no problem. But if it is, then you want to go up and around again because you don't want to fight mobs you don't need, especially since you're going to be over count. Okay, so we've now cleared the upper half. So take a look at the map, you know what I mean? Open the map and you'll see why this is so confusing. Because there's all these doors. There's all these different doors on the map. And they lead you to the different layers of the dungeon. There's like actually 5 layers. It shows the upstairs map if you go to the upstairs, but you're never really going to need to look at the upstairs map. It's pretty obvious. You know, the upstairs map is not really anything. But the cellar and the other 2 below it are the ones that we need to get to, obviously. So if you're doing this for the first time, or you've done this mildly, you might realize that there's a couple different ways to get down there. Okay, so let's talk about those ways. So I'm gonna actually put a marker just so we have reference. Okay, one of the ways is here. Okay, so basically, if you start on the right side, you're gonna end on this side, and this is the door you're gonna use to get downstairs. Okay. Now, if you're going the opposite direction, which is the ideal route, if you went left first, then this would be the ideal route. You'd end on this side. You'd kill Raal. We'd kill Raal, and then we'd go this way. All right, so this is like a little, it's kind of like a butcher's block area here. A bunch of maggots. A lot of times there's an emissary here, but again, won't matter in Season 4, I'd imagine. We'll see what's here. But yeah, just kill these maggots. Make sure you interrupt. And here's the other door. Okay, so let's show that off. All right. Just down here. Okay, this one's actually a little bit of a pain because you might want to jump over the railing, something like that, to get down here. People might get line of sight while they do. All right, so let's go in and clear this place out. There's not much going on here, long story short. It's pretty much the same mob types that we've seen the whole time. There's one mini boss type mob, but just be aware that if that door closes, you lose line of sight on the mobs. So you might accidentally click that door. You know, it happens all the time, literally all the time. So try not to fight them against the door, or basically make sure everybody's on one side of the room. A little bit of weird stuff going on here, a bit of a satanic ritual in the basement here, I guess. But anyway, yeah, I never actually noticed that. But anyway, so typically if you went left first and you'd come, so the route we just took is if you went the good route above, right? So now that we're down here, you probably need extra count. So you might want to pull this pack for extra count. But what you definitely want to think about is Matron Elma. Okay, typically you could skip her with Shroud if you're over count. But it's very, very, very good. Like, it's the highest count per HP in the dungeon. Like, if you need count, if you need a lot of count, you want to pull her. She doesn't have that much health realistically, and she gives a lot of count. Okay. So that's if you went to the ideal side. Now let's go all the way back upstairs. I'm going to show you the other direction, okay? You'd clear that stuff, and then you'd go downstairs. But that was if you went to the side with Heartsbane Triad first. We have gone to the Soulbound, or the Raal the Gluttonous and Soulbound Goliath side first. So now, pretending we've killed Soulbound Goliath, blah, 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 we're going back. We just killed Heartsbane Triad, and we're resuming where we just were. Now we're going down this door, okay? Again, door is open as soon as you kill all 3 of the upper bosses. And now this part gets a lot more complicated, right? The other side, you have a lot of room to fight these mobs in. it's not very dangerous. But down here, you really don't want to pull. Basically, Matron Elma would pat into us here if we fought any of these mobs right here. So what a lot of people do is they might aggro them and then run up the stairs. So you as a DPS, you need to be aware of this. If the tank is gonna, if you see the tank start running up the stairs, don't stay down there and attack, because obviously you're gonna get threat and you're probably gonna get extra mobs pulled as well. Okay, but yeah, it's the same mobs. Really, see, nothing new down here. Everything's the same at this point. So, you know,
actually makes a lot of sense because I've seen tanks run down there and say, "Don't follow me."
Yeah, yeah. So that's one way to deal with it if you're fighting it. But realistically, unless you're doing like a key where nobody cares about count, like a lower key or something like this, realistically, you're gonna want to skip here. Okay. Again, those 2 packs plus Matron Elma are going to be way more count. If you go to Raal's side first and you come this way, you know, this is the way you've ended up coming, it's very, very, very likely that you're over count. So what a lot of people do is they get to this bloodstain and then they shroud a rogue, you know, shroud of concealment with the rogue, or they can use an invis pot. All right, you got invis pots, you go ahead and use one of those, just drink it and then run. You're going to run to the stairs down here. Okay. And if for some reason you can't do this, all you need is the healer to do it. Get down, the healer can get down to about here, and then the other 4 people can aggro the mobs, and then they can just run to right about up here, die here. Healer will be able to res you. Pretty another good option if not everybody has invis pots. But one way or the other, if you've come down the way we just showed, you're going to be over count. So it's definitely in your best interest to skip those mobs. And again, that's assuming season 3 or earlier. Season 4 is probably going to change everything about how people do and don't do trash. So we'll see. Down here, these mobs, things get a little bit more complicated. It's actually those soul essences that we saw at the very beginning of the dungeon. We've seen 1 or 2 of them since, but down here you're going to see a lot more. They don't really do anything, but the soul charmer is a very dangerous mob type, okay? So typically what I like to do is this. I like to grip it up here and pull this big pack, get this out of the way. By the time that soul charmer gets up here, you could oftentimes have these other mobs killed, at least one of them. But the soul charmer is the main mob. Let's see if we could, don't kill it. Let's see if we could see its mechanic. It might not happen just because it's lower. Yeah, there it goes. Warding Candle. So as you see, Warding Candle reduces mobs that are stood in it by damage taken by 50%. So if you have a complacent tank, expect this pack to take forever because the tank is not going to realize it, all right? And they're going to have these mob in here the whole time. And it's a big deal. It really slows this mob type down. It's already got a lot of health compared to everything else down here. But a lot of the times you might try to pull it all. You know what I mean? Like you might get all of this. And this Mark's sister will also do that mechanic, I'm pretty sure. Let's find out. I'm pretty sure that's the case. But either way, if you see one down, you know, you definitely want to have a weak or something tracking that ability. If you see one down, you have to move it as the tank. If you're not the tank, it's going to be difficult to get them out of there. You could ring them. I guess you could knock them out with ring.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like it's doing it.
Ring them like that.
Yeah, there you go. Ring them will knock them right out. But the main one that casts it, it's not actually going to get knocked out by ring. It's immune to stuns, grips, etc. So it won't work on that one, but all the other ones will. So best bet is kind of like kite them around this little area here. Make sure that they're never stood in that thing. Okay, so now we're on to basically the main characters of this dungeon, the Waycrest family. Been taunting you the whole dungeon. Finally time to take her out. But this is not your normal encounter. There's 2 mobs, but as you see, Lord Waycrest has 10% of the health of the other one, which is kind of odd, right? But the way it works is you have to kill Lord Waycrest 4 times. His health pool has to go to 0 4 times. I'm pretty sure it's 4 times. It's going to be a bunch of times, one way or the other. So don't get baited into thinking it's dying fast. I was kind of joke about this on the live stream. I was like, oh my god, he's dying so fast. We're going to crush this fight. But then the problem is, after the final time she heals him, basically, yeah, she has like a, here, let's see. I'm going to aggro it. And you'll be able to tell immediately because she has like a bar. So yeah, let's kill him real quick and then don't kill him again. As you see, she's going to heal him when he gets to like 10% or something like that. Yeah, there it is, Vitality Transfer. Yeah, so it's based on her health. So 100% to 70, then it's probably, you know, to let's just see. She's going to do it a couple times. I guess it's 3 times total. And then the final time she's going to, yeah, the final time she's going to come out. So you're going to see here, I'd like to show ideally what happens here because the boss always spawns with more health, like the Lady Waycrest portion of the boss, and people don't realize that, and they switch to her thinking, oh, she's only at 20% health, let's kill her. But even at 20% health, she still has more health than he does. So it's still better to kill him. That's what I'm trying to get at here. You want to finish him, okay?
Gotcha.
So let's see if we can make this happen here. So she's going to spawn with 368k, and he still has 320k. So they have almost the same health, but he still has more. So don't get baited into attacking her. It looks like you want to do it because she's 10% health or whatever, but you don't. You want to finish him. He is way more dangerous than she is. If you kill her, it's over. Okay, you've killed him, or you killed him, it's over. All right, then you just finish her up. So anyway, we didn't really talk about any of the mechanics. The boss is actually really straightforward. Interrupt as much as you can on that like mechanic there. That he does like a cleave. The main dude does a cleave, and it's magic damage. So make sure as damage dealers you're not in front of it. Otherwise, as DK, you could AMS. Use magic mitigation tank wise. The main thing is while she's still up there, she's going to be casting an ability called Discordant Chaos or something like that. It's going to put these purple circles on the ground. If anybody gets hit by them, she casts another wave of it. It's kind of like a musical thing. Like she'll cast one bar of it, and then if anybody gets hit by that bar, she'll cast another bar of it until she's cast so many bars that she stops the ability. So you either got to dodge, like make sure nobody gets hit by any of the first wave, or you're going to be running pretty much from side to side the whole fight. So just be aware of that. In a pug, you're going to always see multiple waves because people aren't going to move. And then the only other mechanic on the main part of the fight is that green circle. It is a dispellable. I'm pretty sure it's a poison. Might be a disease, but it's a big green circle. You don't want to dispel that, especially as the healer. Just don't bother. Let the person run out when it's comfortable for them. When it expires, it will hit another person if they're in it, and it will put it on them as well. So that's why you don't want to dispel it. If you did, you'd likely have 5 people with it, especially if they're stacked. So it's better to just let the person go, run it out when they need to, and drop it, and just make sure nobody's standing in it, okay? All right, so this is probably the most complicated part of the dungeon trash-wise, and it's kind of unassuming. Like, you wouldn't expect it, but at this point, the timer's on. You know what I mean? You have a very little amount of trash left, and you have one boss left, so people really want to make up the maximum amount of time. Now, again, at this point, if you came the route that we just showed coming down here, the right side, you will probably want to try to skip at least some of this. If you have a rogue or you have an ability to skip it, you should. You can do that with controlled wipes. Have a shaman, Ankh or something, battle res, something like that, skip it all. You can invispot if you didn't invispot the previous one. Not a bad choice. I don't really like invispotting when there's a lot of stuff left. Because if you invispotted that previous thing, it means you're not going to be able to potion for this boss or the last boss, realistically. Maybe you would because it might take so long, but yeah, that's pretty much the case. So invispotting here is better. If you're going to do Rogue, Shroud, Invispot, both of these, you want to invispot this one instead. But, a lot of people just pull it now because I'm going to show you this crazy tip. You might not actually be able to replicate it because we're 2 melee, but basically, I'm going to aggro. I'm going to put my D&D down there. It's going to aggro all of these mobs, okay? Then we're going to run it over here, okay? If somebody is up on this windowsill, the mobs cannot jump. So get up on that windowsill. Did you see them jump? So they're jumping on me. They cannot jump again. They're always going to jump to their furthest target, and you're up there. They cannot get there. So you can actually attack them from up there, right? You know what I mean? Like, you can still attack them. And as long as you're up there, they cannot jump, which is the hardest part of this for sure, the hardest part of this. Absolutely, they do a ton of damage every time they jump, and you really got to make sure that when they're jumping, you're either using like defensives, your big healing, or you're just preventing it entirely by doing this. So, a little bit of an exploit, obviously. It's not quite snapping level exploit, but this is something that you might see very, very common, okay? So usually if you got a healer and range, they'll be up there. You as a melee, you don't really have to worry about it. You can, up there as a melee, it means you're probably not hitting all however many targets you've pulled. But typically,
gotcha.
if you have, for some reason, no range, like if you got a Holy Pally and 3 melee, somebody's going to have to stand up there. So just be aware. Now, if you're doing like a low key and the tank doesn't know that, you're going to either have to try to explain it to him or just suffer the consequences of doing it normally. And it's really not that dangerous. So if you're going to fight them normally for some reason, like they fix that or doesn't happen because your tank doesn't know what he's doing, what I would recommend is fighting them right here, basically, right in the center here. A lot of people, they fight him in the trench, which isn't a good option because, first of all, unless all 5 people are down in the trench, you've just opened yourself up for a world of hurt. The mob is going to jump from the trench up here because that idiot healer range is up here, you know what I'm saying? So then to get back down there, they have to run all the way down and around back through the trench. So you're just killing your DPS by doing this. So if you're not going to fight them on the windowsill, try to get everybody on one level, one way or the other. But this would be the level you want to fight, because if you die here to this trash, which happens all the time, the trash is extremely dangerous. If you die here to this trash, you actually res right here, right in the dead center of this little area here. So it's not the end of the world. Nice. It's actually pretty easy to circumvent a full wipe here, because even if the tank dies or somebody key dies, they can just res. They might die again, but literally you're basically fighting them on a graveyard. So there's no reason that you should actually fully wipe to this, but you might still end up dying. Like might have like 5 plus deaths to it. So that's pretty much the dungeon. If you get to this point with like, you know, multiple minutes left, expect to time the key, because this boss is pretty straightforward. There's really only one mechanic, which is kind of crazy for a last boss. Usually the last boss of a dungeon is the hardest one. But this is the complete opposite. Heartsbane Triad, which has potential to be the first boss, is absolutely the hardest boss in here. No matter what week it is, I think that's always going to be true. And this boss is really easy. There's only really one mechanic. He's going to do, he's going to send out an ad. An ad's going to spawn, and it's going to channel on a person. That person is going to be stunned while it's channeling. You could prevent this in any way that you'd think. Like, you know, you could fear it, knock it back, stun it, you know, anything. Interrupt it with Death Grip, Ring of Peace, those types of things, knockbacks. Anything you can do to stop that cast, you want to do that. Otherwise, you just kill it as fast as possible. A lot of people pad off the boss and they just cleave it, which is fine on most keys. But, you know, if the mobs, basically, if you have 2 mobs up, then you need to target them. Like, you know, they're both going to stun. You're not going to be able to stop both of them very easily. You have a 3rd up now. You're done. It's over. You're going to have, everybody's going to be stunned. So you just want to kill them quick. And then there's this little thing of fire on the ground, which when you pick it up, it's going to give you an extra action button. And the boss, there'll actually be an emote. The dude will be quickly burn it, he'll say. That means that when the ad dies, you want to use the extra action button, the fire mechanic that you got. You want to throw it on the ad that died, and then it's going to go away for good. If you don't burn the body, he's going to periodically res any ad that's still there. So basically, let's say you killed 10 ads, and for some reason you didn't burn any of them. It's not really feasible, but if you didn't, he could then res all 10 of them, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, never going to happen, but it is something. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. The only other mechanic he does is this physical AoE. It's actually, I'm pretty sure it's physical. But there you go, Death Touch Slaver. It's going to summon that, and you'll see it here. It's going to, oh, then Darken Lightning, you want to interrupt that too. But the Slaver is going to, you know, Dread Bolt, just a regular cast. But there's the fire there, so go pick that up. You got it, he got it. Cop's got an extra action button. Now you can throw it on the corpse, go and do that. Boom! Look at that, big plays. Hashtag see that mob. So he's not going to be able to res it now. He's still going to spawn another one though. And Dread Essence is going to be that AoE. Maybe it is magic. I didn't take damage from it, so it must be magic. Anyway, either way, it's just an AoE. Just use a defensive or get ready to some kind of heal afterwards. But that's pretty much it. He's going to constantly summon these ads. He's going to need to be interrupted. And the Slavers are going to channel an ability, which I'm not going to see here on normal. But every time one of them dies, you want to have this. Ideally, it'd be the healer doing it. Somebody the most mobile, usually the healer, one person who's doing the least. Yeah, so the Dread Essence is also, not only is it the AoE, but it's also the mechanic that it reses the mob, by the way. So you just want to make sure. So this is actually, it heals the mobs too. This is something else I should have mentioned. If the mob is alive and he uses the Dread Essence ability, it will heal the mob to full. So if the mob spawns and he's doing Dread Essence while you're killing it, just stop. Just tunnel the boss for a bit, let him Dread Essence, then kill the mob. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of complicated. A lot of the times what happens is you'll be like 2%. The mob will be at like 2% and he's going to heal it to full. It's kind of troll, right? But yeah, just got to deal with it. So that's everything. So it's pretty common in the old days to not have count at this point. And that was more with reaping. But now, I don't, maybe with Season 4 it's going to happen again. If that is the case and you don't have count, you can talk to this chick here, Lucille Waycrest. Talk to her. She's going to take you back to the start. So go ahead and do that. You'll be back to the start here, which is perfect anyway for this video. But typically then, at that point, what you might want to do is come to the right side here. At this point, all the doors are going to be open. So there's no possibility of having to run around awkwardly. And this pack that we aggroed by accident before, right in front of the fireplace, really good option to get the last few pieces of count. It's the easiest pack in this little area here, but... So anyway...
then you'd have to run all the way back to get your loot.
Yeah, you have to run all the way back, but you've completed the timer. That's all that really matters, right?
True enough.
Okay, so what are you thinking? Now that we went through the entire dungeon, anything that you're still unsure of?
I think the only thing for me that's going to be hard is it's going to be practice running through it, all the different paths to get them set in my brain.
Right.
But it's good that I kind of have an idea of all the different paths.
Yeah.
They all kind of bleed back into each other anyway.
Right. So the only thing to think of here that I haven't really touched on. So if we start on the right side, start on the Raal side, okay? Let's do that. Like, okay, we've come bottom right now. We're here. We're killing this pack. I'm going to pull, again, I'm going to pull this. I'm going to come in here, pull this pack that's right here. I'm going to pull them out into the hallway because they have that dangerous AoE kind of dude. We're going to kill them out here. Then we're going to run back in. We're going to go now hug the left here. There might be a spawn from this organ. Realistically, if there was, it would have aggroed with the pack that we just talked about. But you want to make sure you don't pull that pack over there with the D&D. Then hug the wall here. Go down here, okay? Don't go too far. That's the stairs. You don't want to go that way. You want to go down here, okay? You're gonna go this way. I guess maybe if it is deterministic, the start is deterministic of the rest, you might be able to skip the rest here, and you might go in here. You pull a couple packs here. You kill Raal, blah blah blah. Go out this way. Kill the pack here. Progress towards the next boss here, and then you're gonna go to that side, okay? The reason I'm telling you all this is because if you die on this side of the dungeon, the door is not open, right? So if you're over here fighting this, which is on the way to the third boss, you die to one of these packs of trash. Happens all the time. The trash pats, like I said, it's gonna pull extra stuff. Sometimes you might wipe to the trash. Well, if you died here, you'd be back at the start. And I think this is probably the thing that I've seen you have the most trouble with, is getting back to where we are when you die and res at the start.
Because at that point, I'm completely lost.
Yeah, but now that you've seen every route, you understand, like, you just go the same way you went the first time, you know? So,
yeah.
It's just getting used to the map. The map is a lot more confusing than it needs to be because it's got all these stupid doors. You probably agree with that, right? All those doors are probably
Oh,
wrong.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's way more confusing than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Like,
But that's pretty much it. I mean, it looks like a maze of a dungeon, but it's really not. There's only one way that you can go at any given time. If you start on the right side and you wipe ahead of the third boss anytime, you just take the same path you went. If you start on the left side and you wipe any time ahead the third boss, which would then be Raal, the third boss would be Raal. You would kill the Triad first, then the Tree Dude, then Raal. You would do the exact same thing. Whatever route you went in originally, you would take the exact same route. You know what I mean? So you just got to have the wherewithal of remembering where you started and where you're ending. And don't look at this mirror. It is so freaking freaky, man. Oh, man. This dungeon, they really... Oh, it's scary just looking at that. Anyway, this dungeon, they really mastered the ambience and maybe a little bit too much. I mean, think about this. This is the only Mythic Plus dungeon in the game that has this carousel of options. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different ways you can go. It's almost a little bit unfair. And I think a lot of people would agree that it's unfair, even Blizzard, because during the MDI, they don't allow it to be random. They choose the route before the dungeon begins. So that tells you everything you need to know about this dungeon. You know what I mean? It can be very unfair at times. If you go top left, you have a significantly higher chance of upgrading this key because you're going to be dramatically below count. You'd have to go out of your way to get count at that point. Whereas if you go right side at all, especially upper right, you are now going to be dramatically over count because you're going to pull extra mobs on the way to Raal, and you're also going to have to go up on the left side when you come over to Heartsbane Triad, meaning you're going to have to pull at least 2 extra packs than what you might have pulled if you just went downstairs there. So, yeah. Complicated.
That is a lot of info to digest for sure.
Mm-hmm. But that's it. I mean, once you get... If you can just kind of like train your memory to be like, all right, I know which way we started, and that's the way we're gonna go. It's not really a maze. There's only one way to go. Like downstairs here, it's the same thing. Like you could enter either direction, and it's still gonna get you to where you want to go. You know what I mean? So at the worst, you went the wrong way. If you went down this way and you hadn't cleared it, you just go back around to the other side, and here, this is the other side of the dungeon. So it's actually
really
ingenious.
What I need to do is take a note when we're starting, whether we're going top or bottom and left or right.
Yeah, just
top, left, bottom, right.
It's easy for me because whenever I stream this, people always bemoan when we get one of the ways. Like people are like, "Oh, you got so lucky, you got the good side," or people are like, "Oh, lol, you got top right, GG, might as well leave." So it's like, just whenever you start the dungeon, just say out loud. This is the best way I've always known to remember things. Just speak the words top right, bottom right, blah blah blah. And then, you might remember. It'd be easier to remember if you do wipe, but obviously, ideally you just won't wipe. But
I remember, and this is something I remember back in college all the time. They taught us in psych class, say something 3 times, you'll remember it. So top right, top right, top right.
Damn.
And hopefully you remember it.
That's a great little strategy there. I like that. I always just say it, but 3 times is even better. But anyway, that's it. So part of this series, we're going to talk about what the biggest mistake you could make. We're calling it the biggest noob moment. The biggest noob moment is get lost. Don't get lost. Frankly, it's the truth. Like, if you get lost, if you die, you've hurt your team, right? Especially because, like I say, you could be like, think of it this way. It's effectively like a 10-mile race, okay? Starting mile 1 is going right through Raal. Mile 3, 4, 5. Then you get to the left side. You're at Heartsbane Triad. Mile 10. You're at the finish line. Once you kill Heartsbane Triad, all the doors open. But you wiped at mile 9.5. You now have to rerun the first 9.5 miles to get back to Heartsbane Triad, So that's bad enough. Wiping and then having to run through the whole dungeon. It's a small dungeon, but having to run through all these hallways is a big problem. You got to do that on your own. That's a problem. But guess what? You get lost, you go up instead of down, or down instead of out, or whatever you could do. Oh man, that's a big mistake. So don't make that mistake. And also don't be fooled by these excess doors. These don't do anything, okay? I mean, they do open, but this is never going to be one of the ways you can go. It only opens once the entire room is open, and it's nothing. Would never go that direction, you know what I mean? So don't be fooled by those excess doors. They're not ever going to interact with your path.
Gotcha.
So that's everything. Any questions or anything?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. It's just going to have to be, practicing rote memory type of thing for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
thing, as you say,
if you're really struggling with it, you can literally just come in here, run it on normal a bunch of times, and just practice the different options, But
that might be something I do anyway.
Yeah.
It's a noob to pro tip. Just come and run it on normal and reset it. Figure it out. Because it's that much of a
Yeah, you basically have to learn 3 different dungeons, you know what I mean? Like the different options, you're going to have to learn them all, and it might take you 10 or 15 times to even see all 3 of them, You might never get them, so yeah, you just have to see them. Okay, well, that's everything for this one. If anybody has any questions after watching this, let me know. Hopefully this helped. Again, the big thing is to just know the paths, and basically, there's a lot of interrupts, even on bosses, that you really got to be careful for. A lot of key mechanics, especially on Heartsbane Triad, that you got to be careful for. So just get in here and practice it. Once you get it down, I think it's one of the easiest timers in the game. In fact, a lot of people believe it is the easiest. If you go left side, people do believe it is the easiest timer in the game. Just kind of objectively, because you need so little trash. You could choose what you want. And that's that. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.